Hi, Judy from Bungalow Quilting and Yarn here. I want to show you some techniques from another book that I'm writing that will be coming up soon. My package date is next month, so the book won't be out for a little while yet. But you know me from C&T Publishing. I have Quilts for Scrap Lovers, Rainbow Quilts for Scrap Lovers, and So Cuddly. Those are the three titles that I have published through C&T Publishing. Now, publishing is kind of a lonely world because you have to do all kinds of secret sewing. You can't splash your projects on Instagram or on Facebook or even on your own blog because this kind of thing can't be published. Your projects can't be published prior to getting them to the publisher and having them get them out into the market. So sometimes it's kind of sad because it looks like we're not getting anything done when secretly we're secret sewing in the background and getting lots and lots of good things done for publication. So I have a project that requires some bias borders, and I would like to show some of those techniques because when you're wanting to jazz up a border sometimes and you can't think of a way to do it, here's one very, very simple and fun way. Okay, so here is a little piece. It's a little border on something that I've been working on. And I'm not gonna give it away and tell what I'm working on, but you can see that the border is a bias edge and it's really just so cute, and it's something that people sometimes forget to do. If you just want to jazz up your border a little bit, sew some strips together and cut them on the bias, and I'm going to show you just how to do that. So for my bias border, I've started out cutting out 1.5 inch strips. Now you can make these as wide as you want to. You can make them, 2.5, 3.5, whatever. You can make them as wide as you want to, but I've chosen 1.5 inch strips for these. So I've got them in multiple colors here, and I'm going to sew them together in whatever order I want with just a straight seam, a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I have my 4 strips sewn together. Remember I said they were 1.5 inch strips by width of fabric. And I'm going to press all the seam allowances in one direction. I'm pressing them all in one direction. And when you do that, it's equally important to flip those strips over. And I guess this is true of any time that you're sewing strips together, but flip the strips over so that you can see that there aren't any big major lips in between the strips. So no lips between your strips. That means you want them nice and flat. You want to pull that out. See that? Right there, there was kind of a lip right there. So I'm going to pull that out and make sure that I'm getting the full benefit of using the 1.5 inch strips. So go all the way down, pressing your seam allowances all to one side. Now you're thinking, well, what's she going to do to stabilize those bias edges once we start cutting? And I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that. Okay, so now I have my 4 strips sewn together, and I made a little nick right where the center of the width of fabric would be. So there's a little nick there, and I'm just going to cut right down the center. And why do I want to cut those in half? Well, I'm cutting the strips in half because they're 44 inches long. And what I want to do is I want to then make them twice the width. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sew this right sides together. 2 sets of strips, or so make it, it'll be 2 sets. It was 1 set of strips. 1 44 inch by 1.5 inch for each of these. And then now I'm going to sew these together, alternating my colors there so that I have, so it'll look like this, okay? And once I've sewn them together, then I'm going to reinforce the back of this with a woven fusible interfacing. Okay, so instead of having 4 strips, I'll have 8 strips. Okay, so now you see, here are my strips. I've got 8 of them. I've pressed the seam allowances all in the same direction. And I'm going to use a woven fusible interfacing. Why a woven? Well, first of all, I like to avoid anything fusible in the first place. I don't think there should be any glue on your quilts. Quilts were not meant to be glued together. And so anytime I see some type of fusible being used to make a quilt, I feel like That's not a permanent solution. It's temporary, and quilts shouldn't be glued together. So to kind of counteract that, I like to use a woven piece of fabric, because then once it's stitched in, if your fusible eventually deteriorates or moves away, you've got a piece of woven, a nice piece of woven cotton that is sewn, or ironed and then sewn to your section of your quilt. And it makes it more real. Why would you put paper fusibles or anything like that into your projects? It just don't make them real. So I am going to iron this on to the back so that it totally stabilizes those edges, so that when I do cut them on the bias, I'm not going to have any stretching. Now, something I want to mention with using fusibles, like I've said before, there's glue on one side of them. When you put the temperature to your iron up to cotton, you're taking a risk that you are going to iron on it for too long. And if you hold the iron to that fusible for too long, what you're going to do is just cause that fusible to get absorbed into the cotton on the other side, and then it won't stick. I've had customers call me and say, this woven fusible interfacing you've sold me, it's not sticking. Well, you've done one of two things. Either you haven't set your iron hot enough, or you set your iron hot enough, but you left it on there for too long. Now your fusible has absorbed into this, and it's no longer acting as a fusible because it's totally melted into this fabric, and then this piece is coming free. So it's just a real balance. It's walking a tightrope as to how hot to make your iron and how long to hold it on there. And that's all I can say for that, is that once you get more experience, you'll get a feel for knowing how to iron it to make it stick. Okay, so we're ready to start cutting the bias strips. Okay, so when you cut your bias strips, here's your quilting ruler. You have 30-degree line markings, you have 45-degree angle markings, you have 60-degree angle markings. So what do you want to use? Well, you want to use the 45-degree, and this is this one right here. And this gets confusing to people sometimes. They're not really sure how to lay that line. Well, you're going to act as if your 45-degree angle is the base of your ruler. So you're going to put it on the very base of your strips, all right? You're going to line that up with that straight edge. And then when you cut along this edge right here, then you know that you've got a 45-degree angle. So I don't want to waste any fabric, so I want to move this all the way over to there, all right? And make sure my 45-degree angle is on the bottom here, which it is, okay? So there it is up there. So now I've made my cut. Here, I'm pulling this away. And I haven't wasted anything up here. I mean, this piece gets wasted. That totally gets wasted. You're not going to use that. And now I want my strips to be 1.5 inches wide. You could make them any width you want to, but I want mine to be 1.5 inches wide. So I'm going to take them and I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn this so that it's on one of the line markings on my board, all right? And I'm going to measure 1.5 inches. So 1.5, that would be right between the 18 and the 19. And I'm going to put my ruler back. And then get this piece out of there. Between the 18 and the 19. Right there. Okay. So this edge is perfectly lined up with a line, and then this ruler edge is between the 18 and the 19, which gives me a 1.5 inch strip. Now I've cut along that 1.5 inch strip, so I have one piece right here ready to go. Okay, so now I've moved this over. I've got the edge once again along a straight edge, and then I've got the ruler 1.5 inches away from that straight edge, so I'm ready to cut that second piece. So now you would go ahead and you would cut all the rest of these into 1.5 inch pieces, and then it would make it as long as you needed it to be. If you just, you're the designer, you make these strips for as long as you want them to be for the project that you're doing. So here's two of them. Here are two of my strips, and I've trimmed away the woven fusible interfacing, as you can see from here. Now this is the bias edge. And this is what I'm talking about being very, very stretchy. Now, first of all, you need to handle these like it's a pie crust. You need to handle it as if you were a delicate pie crust and you're moving it from your countertop over to your pie pan, and just gentle, gentle. Just don't work with it a lot. Don't paw it up a lot. Don't handle it a lot. And even though I've got the fusible woven interfacing on the back, which stabilizes it considerably, I'm still going to be careful. I'm still going to try to handle it very, very delicately. So now how do you attach these two pieces? Well, you're going to sew them right sides together. So you're going to put them like this, and you're going to offset this one slightly and this one slightly so that you have a continuous seam, so that when you flip this over, the edges are in line like this. See that? Okay, so I'm going to go to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew them together and then show you how that looks. Okay, so now I've sewn them together, and because I've offset that by just a little bit, look at how that edge is perfectly straight on there. So you can see that sticking out. But once you trim that off, that's got a perfectly straight edge. Now, not only would this be fun to be in a border of something between this and then another solid border or something, but it would also be fun just to make a project or a quilt with, you know, this and then a solid strip and then another one of these and a solid strip, or I mean, just the possibilities are endless. And it's really kind of fun to use up your fabric in a different way just by making these bias stripes.